Jeff, how you doing today?
This is truly one of the highlights of my broadcasting/podcasting career. To see two guys basically looking like they're in their pajamas on a couch hosting a Canucks show. And no word of a lie, I'm wearing baby blue. I have been all day, so I didn't do this just to match with you guys. But this is taking me back in time, way back when, hop in the time machine with me, when I broadcast the Memorial Cup in Kamloops, like way back when. The radio station thought that because it was such a big deal, that our entire broadcast crew should get the same like matching outfits. And Kamloops sort of has a cowboy theme to it. So the blue denim dress shirts, beige pants, kind of like Dave's wearing, a bolo tie. The only time in my life I've ever worn a bolo tie. The problem with the Memorial Cup is it's like a 10-day tournament, and we did every single game. Like, I don't even think I had time for laundry. I had to wear that outfit every day for like 10 straight days. And so, it's bringing back some memories of being dressed like my colleagues here today.
J-Pat, to go on to a more serious topic now, I guess we do have to talk about the game since this is a Canucks show. What were your biggest takeaways after the loss to Tampa?
The best players haven't been the best players since the first period against Calgary, and they were dynamite then, and I think they thought it was going to be easy, and maybe thought the whole season was going to be easy and just a repeat of last year, and it's been anything but. And so a ton of heat on Petey, and I get it, and it should be there based on what he's making and just how much attention has been on him since the start of training camp. But like JT was all world in the opening 20 against Calgary. Let's be honest, there hasn't been a whole lot from JT Miller since then. Brock Besser scored twice in that first period against the Flames. And even Quinn Hughes, who is trying, it's hard to knock Quinn Hughes in the effort, but I posted this earlier today. I mean, 18 of his 25 shot attempts have been blocked. He was lamenting that on Saturday out at UBC when I talked to him after the Philly game, and he was noticing it already. And look, you go back to the playoffs, like Nashville, I think, not that anybody ever figures Quinn Hughes out entirely, but he was having trouble generating the way that he had in the regular season against the Predators. His shot isn't going to scare teams. Like, I think teams are willing to sacrifice and put themselves in front of his shot. It's not Evan Bouchard. And so even Quinn he's got 2 assists in 3 games. It's not a terrible total, but he last year was well over a point a game. And he hasn't had many of those moments yet this season. So we can talk about, moves at the fringe and roster decisions and Branstrom and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, this team's only going as far as its best players are going to take it. And these guys all went to the All-Star game last year, and they were among the league's best. And I would say it's not just Elias Pettersson, that it's all of these players that have kind of scuffled out of the gate after that first period against Calgary the other night.
Rick Tocchet experimented with the lines later in the third period, had DeBrusk with Miller and Besser and Hoagland and Garland up with Pettersson, which I said on yesterday's show is a look that I wanted to see with the top 6. Is that a top 6 configuration that you'd like to see the team stick with, or is there a different set of top 6 lines that you want to see constructed for the next game?
No, I'm willing to go down that road. Look, it's still a work in progress, clearly. The offense, 4 goals. I keep coming back to that first period against Calgary. 4 goals in that period and 4 goals as a group since then. So, look, Jake DeBrusk struggled last night. He has yet to score. PD has yet to score. So I think that you're going to continue to try to chip away here and find something that works. And maybe some of this does go back to the preseason and their approach there and waiting too long to get everybody together, although nobody was saying that in the first period against Calgary. But since then, it seems like it's become a little bit of an issue. Whatever the case, and look, I've got time for Arshdeep Bains and the Daniel Sprong came right out of the lineup after 2 games. Like, I get that it hasn't worked up at the top, but I thought maybe there'd be a demotion before he would come right out of the lineup. Again, they didn't lose because Sprong wasn't in the lineup, but Rick Tocchet pushed most of the right buttons last season, and 3 games into this season, it really feels like he's kind of grasping right now and hasn't been able to hit on combinations that have been productive for the Canucks the way that they were from the get-go last year when they got off to that incredible start and just didn't look back. Right now, far too many guys are just kind of scuffling along trying to find their game.
The Canucks need more from him, and I found out after the game that the numbers didn't necessarily match my eye test, but I liked what I saw from Elias Pettersson last night. And again, they need more from him, but to me, that was the most engaged he's looked this season. I know we're 3 games in, but to me, like last night was his strongest game, and I thought he was on the right side of forwards in that game. I thought there was a lot of forwards that you could have issues with last night. I thought Paterson was on the right side of that. What did you make of his game? And really just the criticism around him in the market right now. And I agree, like again, they need so much more than him. The cap hit, all that. They need a lot more from him. But relative to what we've seen from the other top 6 guys and what we saw from those guys through 3 games, I kind of like Pettersson's game last night.
Well, I think you have to come at it from this angle that the bar has been lowered so far in this market for him right now, which is unfortunate. This is a guy making $11.6 million, one of the highest paid players in the National Hockey League. And people are, did you see that back check? Did you see that shot? Like, come on. This is a guy that absolutely, when he is on, has been a dominant driver of play, has been this dynamic force. This guy made scoring goals look easy on his first shot in the NHL, his first 10 games. He had 10 goals. He had 14 goals in the month of January alone in this calendar year. And we're sitting here, and Harm, you got the name Boy Genius for a reason because you're a smart guy. Explain to me how Elias Pettersson has now gone 34 games, playoffs and regular season, without a 5-on-5 goal. 34 games, the last 34 times he's put on a Canuck uniform. He has not scored a 5-on-5 goal. Like, that's hard to do. And yet, here he is. So, for the people that say it's just 3 games, it's not just 3 games. This is a continuation of what we saw last year. And so the bar has been lowered to the point, Dave, that if he looked a little more engaged last night, yeah, maybe he was. But on the bottom line scale, there's nothing to it. This team is winless through 3 games. This is a guy that had 6 points in his first 3 games last year. First player in the NHL to 25 points last season. And here he is with a shot here and a back check there, making $11.6 million. It's just not enough, not nearly enough. And, you know, if he's going to play with Garland and Höglander, you're hoping that these two sort of energizing forces are going to prop him up when it has to, at some point, turn and have him making those guys around him better. And it's just not there. And, you know, the hockey club has to do what it can to sort of help him along, but ultimately it's on him to find out and figure out like what made him that dynamic force in January to the point now that he just looks like a shadow of himself. And I do wonder at some point, like, do you just go back to like Lotto Line had that run through New York on that road trip in January, even in the short term? Like, do you just load up and try to get the mojo going for any of these guys? Tocchet seems reluctant to go Lotto Line, and that's fine. But I just wonder in all of this experimenting and trying to find line combinations that work, if at some point he arrives at that conclusion, just to jumpstart all 3 of those guys and try and get this thing moving.
What do you think is missing from his game right now compared to when he's at his best? Like the individual parts of his game, whether it's his skating, decision making with the puck, the shot, like what attributes aren't there right now for him?
Well, certainly the shot. I think this guy that just used to blow goalies away with the one-timer. We don't see the one-timer on the power play. That doesn't seem to be part of the equation and all the looks that they're trying to set up. We're not seeing that from him. You know, it's a shot that can score, but it's also such a heavy shot that it causes problems for goaltenders. And maybe there's some loose change lying around. You know, you're not always going to score with your shot, but it doesn't mean that it can't lead to some other things. But, you know, I don't see him challenging defenders one-on-one. I don't see him being 2 steps ahead of everybody else. And I think when he's been on his game and he's been at his best, you know, just playing off the instincts that made him the high draft pick, that have made him, like, it's in there. He hasn't forgotten how to play the game. But again, it comes back to nobody's going to feel sorry for him. Nobody is going to pull him along It has to come from within there. And so I don't know, but like when you hear talking about we need guys to dig in, I mean, he hasn't named names yet, but it's pretty obvious that he's talking about Elias Pettersson among others. And I think that's a good way to play it. He just doesn't feel as invested in any of these games as he did when he has been at his highest heights. So hard to figure out. I know there's a lot of armchair analyzing from afar. We're not inside his head. And, does the pressure mount when you're making what he's making? Yeah. But it also comes with expectations because he's done it in the past. And again, I think it's going to be really difficult for the Canucks to get back to the levels that we were at last season if arguably their most talented. I won't say their best player because Quinn's in that conversation and JT when he's on, but just in raw natural skill. I think Elias Pettersson is probably the most skilled player that they've got. And if he's only at 60% of his top speed or that top year, it's going to be difficult for him, and it's going to be difficult for the Vancouver Canucks to get back to sort of the top of the Pacific Division.
Jeff, the roster move today, Erik Brannstrom up, Aatu Räty down. Just your thoughts on that decision.
Yeah, Räty was the easy one, doesn't need waivers, so Baines was up, and again, I think he was all right, where they've got players, whether it's Suter, whether it's getting Nils Amon back in there, they've got guys that can play center lower in the lineup, so I'm not surprised that Räty is the odd man out. Really curious to see where it goes from here for Erik Brannstrom. Nice start on the weekend for Abbotsford. A left shot guy, but the issues have primarily been on the right side, whether it's Juleson, whether it's Desharnais, even Tyler Myers, who, to me didn't look 100%. It was great that he's able to play as quickly as he was after the injury the other night, but didn't love the defensive work on the 3-0 goal there early in the third period. So the issues are the right side, both short and longer term, I think. Does Brannstrom slide over, and do they inject this guy in his first game as a Canuck on the right side? Is Derek Forbort going to be guilty of just being a left-handed defenseman who might come out of the lineup? And if that's the case, like at this stage of his career, if Forbort doesn't play every night, not the end of the world. But I am curious to see. I also wonder, too, Brannstrom hasn't officially been recalled by the Vancouver Canucks yet. Like, the team hasn't acknowledged the move. So I'm waiting. Are they waiting till the end of the business day just for cap implications and a little bit of savings on this day? Guys, it's a long way from here to Sunrise, Florida. Like, he's not going to get a practice in. Maybe he gets a morning skate if they have a full morning skate. Do they inject him right into this lineup sight unseen, or does he watch for a game, and do we look for him to maybe make his Canucks debut on Saturday in Philadelphia? I don't have the answer to that, but just the sheer travel, the logistics of getting from Abbotsford to Vancouver and then to Sunrise, Florida, not an easy trip. Trust me, I've done it, and it's just a long, long day of travel. So we'll be interested to see if they plug him in, but can they wait? I suppose is the other part of that question. After what we've seen here through 3 games, where there have been way too many defensive breakdowns, and right now it just feels like anytime they break down, the puck is winding up in their net. So issues at both ends, and I think for anybody that's watched the games, it's not a huge surprise that this team is still searching for its first win 3 games into the season.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how worried are you about the team right now? Only 3 games, but just big picture, where's your concern or worry level from 1 to 10?
Oh, I thought you were going to let me play Family Feud here for a sec. I was excited about that, but someday down the road, not today. Yeah, look, I don't want to overblow this. The Canucks have a ton of talented players, but I can't sit here and tell you that I'm not concerned about a few areas. Goaltending was always going to be an issue. Look, I thought it was important for Artur Silovs to have the performance that he did last night. Obviously didn't deliver a victory, but based on what we saw on opening night, was a whole lot better there. And let's see what Lankinen does. I would assume he gets to start against the defending Stanley Cup champs, but the issues on defense aren't going away, and maybe are getting louder by the game here. And then, as we talked about, top end, just some consistency. Want to see that from all those guys. So 1 to 10, I'll say 7. That leaves room for growth in my concern level, but I think it shows that it's not an insignificant total at this stage. Look, just go back 2 years ago when they fell behind so early in the season and then had to play catch up and chasing, and then you start to lean on your top players way more than you ought to have. This is a team that thinks it's way deeper now than it was 2 seasons ago. but coaches are coaches and habits are just as such that, when you're down and you're needing results, all of a sudden you just turn to your best players, you play the wheels off them, and that's generally not conducive to long-term success. So, yeah, I mean, I think there are some red flags around this group now they're just not playing that Rick Tocchet, staples, and structure hockey that we got so accustomed to all of last season.
The new guys, like, just as we close out here, Jeff, I'm trying to think, like, which new player has impressed me the most. Vincent Desharnais is a healthy scratch. Danton Heinen's a guy. Daniel Sprong was a healthy scratch last night. Of the new players that have arrived, like, who are you excited about through 3 games here?
Well, I thought Kiefer Sherwood had 2 strong games to start. I think, like the rest of the group last night, wasn't his best performance, but I guess it's all relative. Jake DeBrusk needs to score some goals. Had a decent preseason, but yeah, it's been a bit of a sluggish start. And beyond the goals, no shot attempts for Jake DeBrusk last night. Like, that's not the kind of player that he is. So, got to get the puck on his stick in some shooting positions, and then he takes the double minor. Not that that's part of his game, but unfortunately, as they're trying to mount this comeback, certainly didn't help the effort there. So, yeah, it's been a little bit of a sluggish start for Jake DeBrusk. I would agree with your assessment on some of the others. Lankinen looked really good against Philadelphia, so maybe that's the answer there. But I think Sherwood, there's been some moments in his game, and they're still using him penalty killer at times, but not a newcomer. But I don't think there's a single person that has watched all 3 of these games and would come away suggesting that Connor Garland hasn't been hands down the best Vancouver Canucks start to finish in this season. Has a point in every game, has 2 goals, which is tied with Brock for the team lead there. His motor's been going, and you just like to think some of these other guys that are scuffling along a little bit, just look to Connor Garland for some inspiration. If they all played as hard as he did, you'd have to think that some good results would follow.
Time flies. Time flies. The conversations around Connor Garland last year compared to now. You're wondering if Connor Garland can play on all 4 lines based on how he's playing right now. Jeff, thanks so much for doing this. You'll be back tomorrow, 4 o'clock start. And of course, Rink Wide Vancouver, you and Irf will be live after the game. Thanks for doing this, Jeff.
Yep. All right. Always fun being on with you guys. And let's color coordinate again next week.